I left Salt Lake City with a chalk bag still in my truck and a half-packed gear bin sliding in the back. That is the part that keeps replaying for me. Not the sirens, not the shouting at the last open gas station, not the way people started driving on sidewalks when the ramps clogged. It is the normal stuff that stayed in my life for about an hour longer than it should have, as if the world had to finish a sentence before it could fall apart. I did not have a hero plan. I had a habit. When things go bad, I look for elevation, a clean line, a place where I can control approaches. I knew one place that fit my brain and my hands. Kolob Canyons, a cabin I had used before, perched on a cliff face where the approach was a rope problem, not a trail problem. I had been out there with a friend 2 years ago on a long weekend, climbing and sleeping on a platform, drinking water that tasted of plastic jugs and pine needles. The cabin was not a lodge. It was a mean little box built by someone who understood wind, sun, and the fact that most people will not risk their ankles for a view. It sat on a shelf you could not see from the valley unless you knew where to look. The only way up was a line of ledges and a fixed rope that ended at a wooden ladder bolted into the last 20 feet of vertical rock. I remembered the ladder because it rattled when you stepped on it, and because the bolts were newer than the cabin itself. Somebody maintained it. That meant the cabin still existed. That meant it still had a roof. A roof mattered more than comfort now. Getting out of the city took hours. I stayed off the interstate whenever I could, not because I was smart, but because I could not stand being boxed in by other cars. The radio was a mess. Official voices, then dead air, then some local station begging people to stop calling, then more dead air. I saw an ambulance stuck sideways across 3 lanes, doors open, no crew. I saw a man in a business shirt pushing a stroller with no kid inside. I saw a group of people clustered around a bus stop, all of them staring at something on the pavement that I refused to look at long enough to understand. I kept my eyes moving and my hands steady on the wheel. Every time I stopped, I kept the truck pointed outward. Outside the sprawl, the roads got quieter, but the quiet was not relief. It was a warning. A normal highway out there has movement. Trucks, tourists, somebody in an older sedan going too fast. What I got was parked cars on shoulders, with doors ajar and nobody walking. A few times I passed bodies and I did not stop. I am saying that plainly because I do not want to dress it up. I did not stop. My brain did the math before my guilt could speak. Stop equals exposure. Exposure equals becoming a problem somebody else has to solve, or becoming one of the shapes on the asphalt. I took food where I could, quick and clean. A rural market with the front window cracked and no people inside. A campground kiosk with a cash drawer left open and a bunch of maps scattered in the dust. I grabbed propane canisters, peanut butter, salt, instant rice, a case of bottled water, and 2 extra lighters because losing fire would be a slow death. I had a small hatchet, a decent knife, a compact pistol I had bought years ago and barely shot, kept mostly for peace of mind during long drives and sketchy trailheads. I had no fantasy that it made me safe. It made me loud. That was its main feature. By the time the red rocks started showing, my truck was heavier and my mind had narrowed down to tasks. Fuel, water, distance. I stayed away from towns once I saw the first cluster of abandoned cars outside a grocery store in a place I barely remembered the name of. I did not slow down. I watched the edges, movement by the doors, a few figures in the shade swaying in a way that did not fit heat exhaustion. One of them took 3 steps toward the road and stopped, head tilted, as if listening to the engine. That was enough. I kept rolling. The turnoff toward Kolob came with a sign and a parking area that should have been full of rental cars on a normal day. It was almost empty. 2 vehicles sat crooked in the lot with doors open. I parked my truck in the far corner, where the rock wall blocked half the view from the road. I killed the engine and sat still with both hands resting on the steering wheel. I listened. Wind. A distant bird. No voices. No footsteps on gravel. I got out and moved fast. Not running, just quick and deliberate. I grabbed my pack, then my duffel, then the gear bin. Every trip from the truck to the start of the approach felt too exposed, and I hated that I had to do it more than once. The approach began as a rough scramble up broken sandstone and loose dirt. It was the part that could ruin a person even on a normal weekend, because the rock looked solid until it crumbled under your boot. I stayed low, tested every hold, and kept my load balanced. The fixed line was where I remembered it, sun-bleached but still tight, anchored around a thick iron pin hammered into a crack. I checked it with my hands and eyes before I trusted it with my weight. The sheath was worn in one spot where it rubbed a lip of rock. Not cut through, but close enough that I felt my jaw set without me telling it to. I pulled my own rope from the bin and rigged it as a backup, knotting it to a second anchor point. 2 lines, 2 chances. That is what my mind demanded. Hauling supplies up a cliff is not a montage. It is slow punishment and constant checking. I moved in stages, clip in, step up, shift weight, look down, look up, keep the bags from swinging. My arms burned from friction and from the way every movement had to be controlled. Halfway up, a pebble I kicked loose clattered down the wall and disappeared into the distance. I froze, eyes scanning the slope below. Nothing moved. The sound died in the open air, and nothing answered it. That was good, and also not good. Good because I had not called anything up to me. Not good because the world had gotten quiet enough that a pebble was a major event. The ladder was still there, and it still rattled. I climbed it with one hand holding a rung, and the other holding the side rail, keeping my body close to the rock. When I stepped onto the shelf, the cabin came into view in full. Weathered boards, a small window with a shutter, a metal roof with a patch of rust, and a narrow porch with a railing that had been repaired using whatever someone had on hand. I checked the door, locked with a simple padlock. I had brought bolt cutters because I had a feeling it would be locked, and because I did not want to waste time picking at hardware while exposed. I cut it clean and kept the lock. The door opened inward with a grind of sand in the hinge. Inside, the air was dry and stale. Dust on the floor, a small table, a shelf with a few old cans that had rusted through and leaked black stains onto the wood. A bunk with a thin mattress that smelled of mouse and sun-baked fabric. A tiny wood stove with a pipe that ran out through the wall. It was not comfortable. It was not meant to be. It was shelter, and shelter was enough. I set my bags down and stood still in the center of the cabin, listening again. The sounds were different in there. The wind hit the roof with a hollow thump. The boards creaked as the temperature shifted. Somewhere beneath the floor, a small scratching sound stopped when I moved. Mice. Fine. Mice meant life. Life meant not everything had turned into rot yet. I went right back outside. The ladder had to go. The rope had to be controlled. My whole plan relied on one ugly truth. Infected do not climb, not in any useful way. If something cannot coordinate feet and hands, it falls. If it falls enough times, it stops trying. That is how cliffs stay quiet. Humans, though. Humans see a cliff and decide it is a problem to solve. I had to make the problem expensive. I unbolted the ladder from the rock with a wrench I carried for anchors and old bolts. Each bolt squealed as it turned. The noise made my skin feel too exposed, so I worked faster and kept checking below between turns. When the last bolt came free, I eased the ladder down, swung it sideways, and shoved it off the shelf. It fell in a slow arc, hit a ledge, bounced, then disappeared. Then I dealt with the fixed rope. I did not cut it. Cutting it would have felt final in a way that might trap me later. I pulled it up, hand over hand, until the lower end came free from the last visible ledge. I coiled it and brought it inside. My access became my own rope, rigged through an anchor ring inside the cabin, running out a small gap at the base of the door. I could drop it down when I needed to descend, and I could haul it back up until the end sat out of reach from below. A retractable lifeline. It was simple and brutal. It made me feel safer and also made the cabin feel smaller. The moment I pulled that rope up for the first time, the outside world became a view, not a place I could casually walk into. Night came fast out there because the cliff threw long shadows. I ate with my back to the wall, chewing slow, keeping crumbs off the floor because mice become a bigger problem when you cannot afford waste. I poured a small amount of water into a cup and drank it in 2 swallows, then forced myself to stop. I had water bottles, but I did not have a spring. I had a roof and the chance of rain. I had a tarp and a couple of buckets. That was what I was going to live on. The thought sat in my head with the weight of a stone. A cabin 3,000 feet up a cliff is a fortress until thirst starts writing the rules. I slept in short stretches without telling myself that was what I was doing. I would lie down, close my eyes, then sit up when the cabin creaked in a way that sounded wrong. The wind shifted. A bird landed on the roof and scratched around. Something small moved beneath the floor. Every sound was a question. In the dark, my mind kept trying to turn those sounds into steps and voices. I stopped it by focusing on tasks. I planned where I would set the tarp. I planned how I would clean water if I had to collect it from runoff mixed with dust and bird waste. I planned how many calories I could spend a day and still have enough for hauling rope and climbing if I had to leave. Morning light hit the cabin in a hard line. The air outside was cold enough that I could see it in the way my breath fogged the window glass, then cleared. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The view was wide and empty, and it would have been beautiful in a different world. Now it was surveillance. I scanned the slope below, then the wash, then the flat ground farther out. Nothing moved at first. Then I saw it. A single figure far down, near the parking area, walking in a wavering line. The pace was wrong. The head dipped and lifted without purpose. It stopped, turned in a slow circle, then kept walking. Infected. Alone. It was not looking up. It did not need to. It would never reach me. I spent that day building my water setup. I dragged the tarp onto the roof and tied it down with cord, angling it toward a gutter I made from a split piece of plastic tubing I found under the cabin, left by whoever had tried to be clever before me. The gutter led into a bucket set on the porch, shaded by the railing so it would stay cooler. I cut a second hole in the tarp so I could shift the flow if wind pushed rain sideways. I sealed gaps with duct tape. I felt ridiculous, working hard under clear sky, but the work mattered because it was all I could do that would pay off later. Food is predictable. Water is not. Over the next few days, my life narrowed into a loop. I checked the rope for wear. I checked the anchors. I checked the bucket for dust. I checked the horizon for smoke. I watched the parking area through a pair of compact binoculars I had grabbed from a camping shelf in that looted kiosk. I saw 2 more infected wander into the lot at different times, and then drift away. I never saw them try to climb. They stayed where flat ground gave them comfort. I started talking to myself in short phrases just to keep a human voice in the air. Nothing dramatic, simple stuff. Count this, tighten that, eat now, wait. On the 5th day, clouds built over the far ridge. The first gust hit the cabin hard enough to shake the window shutter. Dust lifted off the porch in small spirals. I tightened every knot on the tarp and weighed the bucket with a flat rock so it would not tip. When the rain finally came, it came sideways, slamming into the cliff face and breaking into mist. Some of it ran into the tarp, some of it missed entirely. I stood in the doorway and watched water travel over my setup, listening to the roof ring with each drop. The sound was steady and loud, and I hated how much of my life depended on it. When the storm eased, I checked the bucket. Maybe a gallon, maybe a little more. Not great, not terrible. I filtered it through a cloth and boiled it on the stove, then poured it back into a clean container. The smell of wet dust and hot metal filled the cabin. I drank half a cup and forced myself to stop again. That is the thing about thirst. It does not come as a dramatic moment. It comes as a slow tightening of choices. You start calculating every mouthful. You start thinking of water before food. You start looking at clouds with a kind of attention that feels embarrassing. 2 days later, I saw smoke to the south, a thin smear against the sky. It could have been a wildfire. It could have been a structure burning. It could have been someone signaling. I watched it for an hour until the wind tore it apart. That night, faint sound carried up the cliff. Not speech I could understand, but distant yelling. It came and went. Sometimes it was one voice. Sometimes it was several. It made the whole canyon feel smaller. I stayed inside with the door barred and my rope pulled in, the end tucked behind the table where nobody could reach it from the crack under the door. On the 9th day, I saw the first living people. I spotted them in the morning, moving along the base of the cliff where the rock turned from red to a darker band with streaks of black varnish. One was a man, one was a woman. They wore packs and carried something long that caught light now and then. Poles at first glance. Then the angle changed and I saw limbs, crossbows. Both of them had climbing helmets clipped to their packs. The woman had a coil of rope slung over her shoulder. The man had a bundle of metal that looked like cams and carabiners jangling softly as he walked. They moved with purpose, not wandering. They stopped beneath my general area and looked up, shading their eyes. I backed away from the window and stayed still. My first impulse was relief. Real humans, people who could talk, people who might trade. Then my second impulse landed and stayed. People who could climb. People who could solve my one advantage. I stood behind the wall next to the window, just out of sight, and watched their shadows shift on the porch boards through the crack in the shutter. The woman pointed at the rock, tracing a line upward. The man nodded. They were reading the route. That meant he knew what he was looking at. I waited until they started unpacking. It took them time. They laid gear on a flat rock, sorted it, checked harnesses. The woman tied into the rope with hands that moved fast and confident. The man checked her knot, then looked up again. The two of them spoke to each other, but the words did not carry clearly. The canyon swallowed most of it. I caught fragments. Fixed. Ladder. Higher. Then the woman stepped onto the first ledge and began climbing. That moment forced a decision. If I stayed hidden and silent, she might climb until she hit the missing ladder and the pulled rope, and then she might improvise. If I revealed myself, I might stop her early by making it clear that this was not an abandoned place. I stood in the doorway with the pistol low at my side, not pointed, not brandished, just present. I did not shout. I did not want to turn this into a scene. I stepped onto the porch and used my voice the way I use it on a belay when the wind is bad. "Stop where you are. That route is not open." The woman froze, one hand on a hold, one foot on a small shelf. She looked up, eyes wide in the shadow of her helmet. The man below jerked his head toward my porch and lifted his crossbow halfway without aiming it, more reflex than decision. He held it there, then lowered it an inch. "We are not infected," he called up. "We just want to talk." His voice was controlled, which made me more cautious, not less. I stayed on the porch with my shoulders squared, keeping my stance balanced in case I had to step back fast. I kept the pistol pointed at the porch floor. "Talking happens from down there," I said. "She needs to climb down." The woman did not move at first. She looked down at the man, waiting for direction. That told me something. She was not the leader, or she was deferring because she was on the wall. The man raised his chin. "We have water," he called. "We saw your tarp. We have more containers and a filter. We can trade." Trade. The word hit the part of me that had been counting sips. I did not answer right away. I watched his hands. He had the crossbow slung now, both hands visible. The woman stayed locked in place, arms starting to shake from holding position. That was a real detail, the kind you cannot fake. She had to either move or fall. "Climb down," I said again. "Then we can talk." The man looked up for a long moment, then nodded once. The woman began to downclimb carefully, placing her feet with precision, moving slow. When she reached the ground, she sat on a rock and pulled her helmet off, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. She was younger than I expected, mid-20s, sunburn, dirt on her knees. The man stood beside her, still looking up, still measuring me. "My name is Liam," I called down. "I am not coming down." "I am Grant," the man called back. "She is Sierra." That was the first time in days I had heard names spoken out loud that were attached to living faces. It did something to my focus. I tightened it again by forcing myself to look at their gear and not their expressions. 2 crossbows, rope, harnesses. Enough food in those packs for maybe a week. Water containers clipped to the sides, some empty, some not. The man lifted one container and shook it so I could hear the slosh. "We are running dry," Grant said. "We saw your catch set up. We can make it better. We can help you. We can also leave. But we need water, and we need a place to rest without infected wandering into camp at night." He said it smoothly. He did not beg. He did not threaten. That made it harder. I leaned a shoulder against the doorframe, still ready to move. "You can camp away from the base," I said. "Higher ground, off the wash. Infected stay low." Sierra looked up at me. Her eyes flicked to the rope gap under the door and then away. She noticed. She was tracking details. She was not just tired. "We climbed here because everywhere else has people," she called. "People take what you have. People follow you. People set up roadblocks. We figured a cliff means no crowd." "Cliff means fewer," I said. "Not none." Grant shifted his stance and placed his crossbow on the ground, slow and deliberate, then stepped back from it. "We are not here to do something stupid," he said. "We can prove it. We can leave our rope and gear on the ground and walk back to the trees for the night. We can come back tomorrow for a trade if you want. Water for whatever you need." The rational part of me saw an opening. A controlled exchange at distance. A chance to improve my water setup. The other part of me saw a slow siege plan. Learn my habits. Learn my rope. Wait until I have to descend. A cliff cabin turns from fortress to cage when someone decides to sit beneath it and watch. I did not want to believe that about two exhausted strangers, but believing it was not required. Planning for it was. I will toss down a bottle, I said. 1. You fill it with water and toss it back. You do not climb. You do not touch the rock. If you climb, we are done. Grant looked at Sierra, then back up. Fair, he said. We can do that. I went inside, filled an empty plastic bottle with some of my boiled water, then stopped. That was an emotional impulse, a peace offering. I forced it down. I did not owe them my life. I needed to keep my own baseline. I dumped it back into my container and tossed the empty bottle down instead, tied to a thin cord so I could pull it back if it landed wrong. It bounced once on rock. Then Sierra grabbed it. They filled it from one of their containers and held it up so I could see the level. Then Sierra tossed it up with a good throw, and I leaned out and caught it against my chest. Water. Clean enough by sight. I still treated it. I still boiled it. But the fact was simple. They had more than I did. That meant they had been near sources recently. That also meant they had a route and maybe a camp and maybe other people. You want filters, I called down. What do you want for it? Grant spoke, voice steady. Ammo, he said. Batteries, medical, anything small that is hard to find now. Ammo. That was a tell. Crossbows do not need ammo in that sense. The man wanted bullets for something else. That meant he had a firearm, or he was trading for one. Either way, more risk. I kept my face neutral and my voice flat. I have batteries, I said. A few. We can trade filter for batteries, Sierra called up quickly. We can also trade rope. New rope. The fixed line you have is getting rough. She had noticed the worn sheath, or she was guessing based on sun exposure. Either way, she was right. New rope mattered. I hated that she was right. We do this tomorrow, I said. You camp away from the base. I watch. If I see climbing, I end it. Grant nodded once, then picked up his crossbow and slung it without aiming it anywhere. Tomorrow, he called, we will be up the wash under the pines. We will not climb. They packed up and moved off, slower now, shoulders hunched with fatigue but still with awareness. Sierra looked back twice. Grant did not. That also told me something. He already assumed I was watching. He did not need to check. That night I did not sleep. I moved around the cabin in slow loops, checking the rope, checking the door bar, checking the window shutter. I set up a small mirror angled toward the base so I could see movement from inside without standing on the porch. I tied a bell to the porch rail with cord so any vibration would make a faint sound. The bell was from a camping kit, meant to keep bears away. There were no bears up here. There were humans. Near midnight, I saw a dim light flicker at the base of the cliff. One brief sweep, then darkness. A headlamp covered quickly. Someone checking the wall. I did not move. I did not speak. I kept my eyes on that patch of darkness until the sky lightened at the edge of morning. At dawn, Grant and Sierra were back. They did not approach openly. They appeared from the side, close to the cliff, using the rock shadows, moving in a careful line. Sierra carried the coil of rope. Grant carried a small bag that clinked with hard plastic, a filter kit. They stopped where I had spoken to them before. Grant raised both hands, palms out. We are keeping it clean, he called. No climbing, I stepped onto the porch with a battery pack and a small bundle of AA batteries sealed in a plastic bag. I held them up so they could see. "This is what I have," I called. Sierra held up the filter kit. "This and 2 replacement elements," she called, "plus a length of new rope, 40 meters, dry-treated." 40 meters. My mind measured routes. It would replace the fixed line. It would give me options. It would also give them options if it stayed in their hands. I kept my voice even. "Toss the filter," I said. Then I tossed the batteries. Grant looked at Sierra, then back up. "We toss the filter, you toss the batteries, then we toss the rope," he said. "Rope is expensive." That was negotiation. Fair in a normal world. In this world, it was a test. I made a choice that kept control in my hands. "Toss the filter and 1 element," I said. "Then I toss batteries. Then you toss rope." Grant hesitated, then nodded. He tossed the kit first. It landed hard, bounced. Then I caught it against the porch rail. He tossed 1 replacement element next, wrapped in cloth. I caught it. I tossed the batteries down in the sealed bag, aiming for the flat rock. It hit and slid. Sierra grabbed it and checked it with quick fingers. Then she tossed the rope coil tight, landing with a heavy thump. "Good," Grant called. "Clean trade." I did not relax. I watched as Sierra picked up the batteries and tucked them deep in her pack. I watched as Grant's eyes tracked my hands and the rope coil now sitting near my porch. His gaze stayed there longer than it should have. That was my answer. He cared about my access, not just the trade. "We want to talk again," Grant called, "about sharing the cabin." There it was. I did not answer right away. I stepped back into the doorway and kept my stance square. "No," I said. Sierra's head snapped toward him, then up at me. "We can rotate," she called. "We can keep it fair. You have space. We can sleep on the porch. We can help with water. You cannot hunt from up there. You cannot go down much. You know that." She was not wrong. That was the problem. When someone says a true thing while asking for something, it can sound reasonable even when it is not safe. "I did not come here to run a camp," I called. "I came here to not be found." Grant's voice hardened a fraction. "You are found," he called. "Now the question is, what you do with that." He said it calmly, but the meaning was clear. My cliff did not make me invisible. It made me a target worth time. I looked down at them both, then past them to the slope, to the wash, to where a third person could be hiding. I did not see anyone, but that did not matter. What mattered was that the air had changed. The trade was over. The negotiation was starting. "You leave," I said. "Right now." Sierra took a step forward, then stopped. Her hands were open, but her shoulders were tense. "We are not leaving," Grant said. "Not without a plan. We are not asking to hurt you. We are asking to live." "You live somewhere else," I said. Grant looked up at the cabin roof, at the tarp, at the bucket. "You cannot guard everything alone," he said. "You cannot go down for water forever. You will have to descend. You will have to walk on ground again. When you do, you will be alone at the base with no ladder and no easy escape. That is a bad position." That was not a threat with a raised weapon. It was a threat built out of logic. I hated it because it was correct. I lifted my voice enough to make the line hard. "You are making a mistake," I said. "You came here for safety. You are turning into the problem you ran from." Sierra flinched at that. Grant did not. "We can be the safety," Grant said. We can keep people away from this place. We can watch the base while you sleep. You can keep control of the rope. You can keep the cabin. We just need access to water and a place that does not get overrun. A deal with a hook. A deal that made them essential. That is how you become trapped without a door closing. I shook my head once. No, I said. You go. If you stay under my cliff, I cut my rope and I leave. You get nothing. That was partly bluff. Leaving meant risk. Leaving meant exposing myself to infected and to whoever else wandered these roads. But I needed them to believe I would burn my own shelter to avoid being controlled. Grant studied my face for a long moment. I kept it flat and boring. No anger, no pleading, no fear. Sierra spoke, voice quieter. Grant, she said, looking at him, not at me. This is wrong. Grant's jaw tightened. He did not look at her. You came here because you thought nobody could follow you, he called up. You were wrong. So now you decide if you want to be smart or stubborn. That word, stubborn, landed because it was accurate. It also made my choice simpler. I stepped back into the cabin and shut the door. I barred it. I pulled the rope fully inside and tied it off higher, then moved the knot. If someone reached under the door gap, he would find nothing. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and waited. Minutes passed. Then I heard a rock clack against the porch rail, then another, then a third, not thrown hard, just enough to make a point. Then silence. Then the sound of metal on rock from below, faint but clear. Carabiners. Someone clipping in. Someone stepping onto the route. I moved to the window and looked through the shutter crack. Sierra was on the wall again. She climbed fast, using the same line she had read the day before, moving with confidence now, while Grant stayed below, looking up, hands on his harness. He had changed the plan. He was sending her because she was lighter and faster. He was using her skill and maybe her conscience as cover. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch with the pistol up now, not aimed at her, but held ready. My voice stayed controlled. Stop, I called. Sierra, stop climbing. She froze again, feet on small holds, hands on a crack. She looked up, then down toward Grant. Her mouth moved, but I could not hear what she said. Grant called up. She is just coming to talk closer, he said. No weapons, no rush. You can keep your rope. You can keep the cabin. She will sit on the last ledge and talk. Sierra's eyes met mine for a second. There was apology there. Also resolve. That combination is dangerous, because it means she has decided her discomfort is less important than her goal. People do a lot of damage with that mindset. Climb down, I said to her. He is using you. Grant's voice snapped harder now. Do not talk to her that way, he called. She is choosing. Choosing under pressure still counts as choosing. I knew that. I also knew I could not allow her to reach the missing ladder zone, because once she got close enough to see the porch structure and the door gap, she could improvise something. A hook, a thrown line, a cam placed in a crack to stand higher, a grappling tool made from a carabiner cluster. I had watched people solve worse problems on cliffs for fun. This was not fun. I did not fire. I did not want that sound in the canyon. Instead, I went to the rope coil Sierra had tossed in trade and grabbed it. I tied it to the porch rail. Then I tossed the free end down and let it fall in a clean line, stopping it short of Sierra by about 10 feet. Grant looked up sharply. Sierra stared at it, confused. My voice carried. You want access, I called. Here is access, one person at a time. You come up unarmed. You sit on the shelf below the ladder zone. You talk. Then you go down. If you move higher, I cut the rope. Grant hesitated. He was calculating. He wanted control, not a conversation. But he also wanted the cabin badly enough to gamble. Sierra called up, voice strained from holding position. "Liam, just let us up," she said. "Grant is not going to leave." "I do not care what he plans," I said. "I control the line. You want to talk, you talk on my terms." Grant stepped forward and grabbed the hanging rope end, testing it with a hard pull. "You are giving us a line," he called. "That is smart." "It is controlled," I called back. "You climb, I hold. You mess around, I cut." Grant looked at Sierra. "Come down," he said to her. "We do it this way." Sierra downclimbed, careful and frustrated. When she hit the ground, Grant clipped into the new rope, checked his knot twice, then began climbing with steady, practiced movement. He was good. Not elite, but good enough. He reached the last ledge below where the ladder had been, and I kept the rope tight from above, not hauling him, just making sure he could not drop suddenly and shock-load the anchor. From my porch, I could see the top of his helmet now when he leaned back. He was close enough that his voice carried without shouting. "You see the problem," he said. "We can reach this place. Other people can too. You are one man guarding a prize. That is not stable." "You are not my security consultant," I said. He gave a short laugh that did not sound amused. "I am your reality," he said. "You can either let us become part of this, or you can sit up there until you have to descend, and then you lose it anyway." "You climbed here to take," I said. "We climbed here to survive," he said. "Taking is survival now." That was the core of it. Not infected, not cliffs, philosophy that turns into action. I kept the rope in one hand and the pistol in the other, both steady. "What do you want?" I said. Grant leaned back in his harness, looking up at me. "Two things," he said. "First, regular water. Second, one night in the cabin per week. We rotate. You keep the rope, you keep the door. We sleep where you say. We help maintain the route. We keep other people away." "Or what?" I asked. He smiled without warmth. "Or we sit at the base and wait," he said. "You will have to come down eventually. When you do, we will be there. That is not violence. That is patience." He said it with the calm confidence of someone who has decided that time is a weapon. It is. I watched his hands. He had a small knife on his harness. Nothing else visible. But Sierra was below with a crossbow. If I cut the rope while he was on the ledge, he might fall. That would solve one problem and create another, and it would be the kind of choice that changes how you sleep afterward. I did not want to be forced into that. "You want a hostage arrangement," I said. "You want me to keep feeding you so you do not turn into raiders somewhere else." "Call it what you want," Grant said. "It is structure." I looked past him to the valley. Movement caught my eye. 3 infected, far off, wandering along the wash. They were drawn by nothing but random drift. They would not reach the base anytime soon, but they were there. And they were part of the math. If Grant and Sierra stayed, infected might gather beneath over time, pulled by small noises, pulled by scent, pulled by whatever awful instinct drove them. If infected built up at the base, I would be trapped even more. If Grant and Sierra left, someone else could show up. Either way, the cliff was not solving the world. It was only slowing it. "Here's my counter," I said. "Water trade once, rope trade, done. Then you leave this area completely. Today. Grant's expression shifted. He had not expected completely. You cannot enforce that, he said. I tightened the rope slightly, pulling him a fraction closer to the rock. Not enough to hurt, enough to make him feel that his position depended on my hands. I can enforce what happens on this line, I said. You want to talk about enforcement? We can test it. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he did something that made Sierra shout from below. Grant reached to his harness and pulled out a small metal tool, a compact ascender. He clipped it onto the rope above him with a smooth movement and set his foot loop. He was preparing to climb higher whether I liked it or not, using my rope against me. I did not fire. I did not shout. I moved. I stepped back into the cabin, keeping the rope in hand, and grabbed the hatchet from beside the stove. I returned to the porch with the hatchet raised, blade aligned with the rope where it ran over the porch rail. Grant saw it instantly. His eyes widened a fraction. The ascender stopped moving. You cut that, and I fall, he said, voice tight now. Yes, I said, so you decide how much you trust your own plan. From below, Sierra yelled up, voice sharp, Grant, stop! Stop doing this! Grant looked down toward her, jaw set, then back up at me. You will kill me, he said. I will not rescue you while you take my shelter, I said. That is different. He stared at the rope, then at the rock beneath his feet. He was calculating fall distance, impact points, chances. He was not fearless. He was stubborn in his own direction. Slowly, he unclipped the ascender. Fine, he said. Talk. I kept the hatchet in my left hand and the rope in my right. I spoke in a way that made my own rules clear enough to survive. You and Sierra can camp in the trees for 2 nights, I said. You do not approach the base. You do not climb. I will toss down 2 gallons of boiled water each morning for those 2 days, tied off so you cannot run with my container. In exchange, you leave your extra filter element here, and you leave 1/3 of your rope. After 2 days, you leave the canyon. You go north or south, I do not care. If you stay, I cut my rope and I abandon the cabin. You will not get it. Nobody will. Grant swallowed and looked down again. Sierra shouted up. Grant, take it, she said. Take it and go. Grant looked up at me, eyes hard. You are bluffing about abandoning, he said. I did not answer. I raised the hatchet a fraction closer to the rope, not touching, just close enough that he could see the fibers and imagine the snap. Silence does work if you use it at the right time. Grant exhaled slowly. 2 days, he said. 2 gallons each morning. Then we leave. Climb down, I said. I lowered him, hand over hand, keeping tension. He reached the ground without incident. He did not look up again. He packed his ascender away without making a show of it. Sierra's shoulders dropped a little, and she looked up at me with something that might have been gratitude or resentment. It can look similar when people are tired. They left toward the trees. I watched until I could not see them. Then I went back inside and sat on the floor for a long time with the rope in my lap, staring at the fibers. That rope was my freedom and my leash at the same time. Giving them water for 2 days felt wrong. It also felt better than waiting for the day I had to climb down and meet them at the base with my back to a cliff. The first morning of the deal, I boiled water until the cabin air was hot and metallic. I filled 2 containers and tied them off with cord, leaving enough slack that I could lower them to the base without giving away my rope end. I lowered them, watching the line, listening for any movement beneath. Sierra appeared first, hands raised, stepping out from behind a boulder. She grabbed the containers and held them up, showing she had them. "Thank you," she called up. I did not answer. I pulled the cord back up, then shut the door. That afternoon, I heard shots in the distance. Not close, a few cracks that echoed and then stopped. Grant and Sierra came back toward the cliff edge of my view, moving fast, staying low. They did not come to the base, but they were near enough that I could see Grant pointing down the wash, directing Sierra toward cover. More shots, farther now. Then silence. Then voices, too far to understand. Someone was out there hunting people, or hunting infected. The difference did not matter much. The presence did. Near evening, I saw 3 figures moving along the wash. 2 men and a woman, packs and long guns, scanning the cliff line with binoculars. They stopped and looked up toward my shelf. One of them pointed. Grant and Sierra stayed hidden in the trees, watching. I stayed inside, looking through the shutter crack, holding my breath without thinking about it, hands steady on the window frame so it would not creak. The trio did not climb. They stood there for 10 minutes, then moved on, following the wash. When they were gone, I saw Grant step out from the trees and look up. "You see?" he called. "People will keep coming." I stepped onto the porch without answering, just to let him know I heard him, then went back inside. The message was received either way. That night, the wind shifted and brought the smell of smoke again. I lay on the bunk and stared at the ceiling boards. The cabin creaked. The bell on the porch rail stayed silent. I listened for the scrape of climbing shoes on rock, for the rattle of gear. I heard none. That did not calm me. It made me wonder what they were doing instead. At dawn of the second day, I lowered water again. Sierra retrieved it. This time she did not speak. She looked up once, then hurried back toward the trees. I watched the base for an hour after that, scanning for Grant. He did not show himself. Late morning, a rock clacked against the porch rail again. Then another. Then the bell gave a faint ring. Not from wind, from vibration. Something touched the porch. I moved to the door and opened it fast, pistol up. Nobody was on the porch, but a thin line of cord ran from the porch rail down into the gap beneath the door, trying to hook my rope end. Clever, quiet. Grant's hands at work somewhere below the porch edge, out of sight, trying to fish the rope without climbing openly. I stomped on the cord, pinning it, and yanked it back through the rail with one hard pull. The cord snapped free and whipped off the porch, falling out of view. I did not shout. I did not threaten. I stepped to the porch edge and looked down. Grant was on the last ledge zone again, clipped in on his own line this time, anchored lower. He had managed to climb to the ledge without using my hanging rope, using cracks and gear placements I could not see from above. He held the broken cord in his hand and looked up at me with a flat expression. 2 days was never going to be enough, he said. Sierra was below, standing in the open now, face tight, crossbow slung, hands empty. "Grant, stop," she said, voice carrying. "You are making it worse." Grant ignored her. "You think you can abandon this cabin and walk away?" he said to me. "Where into what? You will be on the ground with a limp in your water plan and no cover. You will come back or you will die out there. You know it." The cord trick told me everything. He had agreed to the deal as a delay. He had used the time to map my routine and test my perimeter. 2 days was reconnaissance. That was the hostage situation showing its teeth. I stepped back into the cabin and shut the door, then reopened it a fraction, keeping the pistol visible but not waving it. I spoke loud enough to carry, calm enough to not feed his adrenaline. "You broke the deal," I said. "So we are done." Grant's voice sharpened. "You do not get to end it," he said. "Yes," I said. "I do." I grabbed my pack from the floor, the one I kept ready, and dumped it out. I started loading it with fast, practiced movements. Food, knife, headlamp, extra batteries, the second lighter, the filter kit, the new rope segment they had given me, my pistol and spare magazine, a compact first aid pouch. I did not take everything. I took enough to move. Then I went to the back corner where the cabin floor had a hatch I had noticed on day one, half hidden under a rug. I had opened it once and found a narrow storage void between rock and foundation, probably used to stash gear and keep it cool. In that void, there was a second exit. It was not a door. It was a crawl space opening that led to a tight chimney of rock behind the cabin, a crack line that ran down and out to a hidden ledge system. I had not used it before because it was miserable and dangerous, but it existed, and it meant my main rope was not my only way off the shelf. Whoever built this place had understood siege before the word became real again. I pulled the rug aside, lifted the hatch, and dropped my pack into the void. I heard Grant's boots scrape on rock outside, closer now, moving along the ledge. He had climbed higher, trying to reach the porch from the side. Sierra's voice rose, sharp. "Grant, you cannot do this," she yelled. "He will cut you." Grant yelled back at her, words lost in echo. I did not listen. I moved. I slid into the storage void feet first, then turned and lowered myself into the crack behind the cabin, shoulders scraping rock. It was tight enough that my chest barely had room to expand, so I moved slow, pausing at each pinch point to shift my pack. Dust coated my hands. The rock was cold. Above me, I heard a thump against the cabin wall. Grant testing a board, trying to find a grip. Then the sound of Sierra calling his name again. Urgent now. The crack dropped steeply for about 15 feet, then opened into a short traverse ledge that ran behind a boulder. I could not stand upright. I crab-walked, keeping 3 points of contact, using fingertips to feel for stable edges. Below, the ledge narrowed into a downclimb that would have been a casual problem on a normal day, except now my hands were dirty and my mind was split between survival and rage. I forced rage out. Rage makes sloppy choices. I reached the first anchor point I had seen earlier when I explored this chimney on day 3. A rusted piton and a newer bolt. Someone had used this route recently enough to add hardware. I clipped my rope, tied in, and began the descent, lowering myself in slow stages, controlling friction with a gloved hand. The rope fed smooth. The rocks scraped my boots. Far above, I heard the cabin door slam open hard. Grant had forced it, or he had reached the porch and yanked it. Either way, the cabin was compromised. I kept moving. Halfway down, the canyon wind shifted again, and I heard voices from the wash below. The armed trio from yesterday, back again, closer. I saw them through a gap in the rock as I lowered. 2 men, 1 woman, moving fast toward the cliff base. They had been tracking Grant and Sierra, or they had been tracking my cabin. Grant's plan had drawn predators. The situation was collapsing into a mess beneath me. I reached a hidden shelf about 200 feet above the base where the chimney route met the main ledge line. From there, I could see the base area clearly. Sierra stood in the open, facing the approaching trio with her crossbow raised, but not aimed at a specific person. trying to keep distance. Grant was out of sight now, probably inside my cabin. The trio spread out, using rocks as cover, rifles low but ready. One of them called out, voice carrying. "Put it down," the woman shouted. "We can talk." Sierra did not lower the crossbow. She took a step back, keeping her feet under her, eyes flicking toward the cliff, toward the trees where she could run. "This is not your spot," she shouted back. "Keep moving." One of the men laughed, short and ugly. "Nothing is anyone's spot now," he shouted. I watched, hands on my rope, body pressed into rock shadow. My presence could make it worse. If I revealed myself, all eyes would shift upward, and then my descent route would become another prize. If I stayed hidden, Sierra might get trapped between raiders and a cliff, while Grant sat in my cabin thinking he had won. A fourth element entered the scene without asking permission. 2 infected wandered into view from the wash, drawn by the shouting. Slow, unsteady, heads turning. The trio noticed them and adjusted positions. Annoyance more than fear. Sierra noticed too and shifted, using the infected as a moving barrier, backing toward a boulder. I made a decision that felt clean because it was based on control, not emotion. I would not save Grant. I would not fight the trio. I would create a break in the pattern and use it to get out. I unclipped from my rope, coiled it fast, and moved along the hidden shelf toward a narrow gully that ran down to the trees. It was steep, loose dirt and rock, but it was quieter than dropping straight into the base. As I moved, I heard the first rifle shot, sharp and loud, followed by the snap of a crossbow bolt hitting rock. Sierra yelled something. Then the trio shouted over each other. I did not look back. I kept my feet careful, sliding in controlled steps, grabbing at scrub and rock edges to slow myself. By the time I reached the tree line, my hands were bleeding in small strips where sandstone had taken skin. Not dramatic, just a series of shallow cuts that sting and remind you that rock does not care. I crouched behind a juniper and listened. The shouting had shifted into short commands, movement on gravel, more shots, then silence, then a loud crack of wood from above. The cabin door or a railing giving way. I eased forward until I could see the base again through branches. Sierra was gone. The trio had moved closer to the cliff, scanning upward now. One of the men pointed at the wall toward my main route. Another infected stumbled into the open, and one of the men shot it without hesitation. The sound slapped the canyon and echoed. More infected shapes moved in the distance, turning toward the noise. That was the real catastrophe. Not one standoff, not one betrayal. Noise in a quiet place. Gunshots call the infected the way a dinner bell calls a dog. The trio had just announced themselves to everything within earshot. I moved deeper into the trees, using the uneven ground to break sightlines. I did not run. Running makes noise and mistakes. I walked fast, stepping on rock where possible, avoiding dry sticks. I kept my pack tight. I kept my pistol in my hand but down at my side. Ahead, the wash opened into a wider valley that led toward a side canyon I knew from old climbs. There was a seep there sometimes after rain. Not guaranteed, but now nothing was guaranteed except that my cabin was no longer mine. An hour later, I found Sierra. She was crouched behind a fallen log, crossbow across her knees, breathing through her nose, eyes fixed on the direction of the cliff. Dirt streaked her face. One side of her helmet strap was broken and dangling. When she saw me, her crossbow lifted instantly, then stopped when she recognized my face. "You got out," she said, voice low. "I had another route," I said. She nodded once, a bitter little motion. "Grant is up there," she said. He thinks he won. Where did those people come from? I asked. Sierra's mouth tightened. From the highway, she said. They are not alone. They have a camp closer to the main road. Grant wanted the cabin because he thought it could be a base. He thought he could charge people for access. Water, shelter, security. I thought he was joking at first. That was the missing piece. It made Grant's patience make sense. It was not about two tired people needing rest. It was about building power. You climbed here with him anyway, I said, keeping my voice steady. Sierra looked down at her hands. I did, she said, because he kept me alive the first week, because he had a plan when everything went sideways, because he was right about people. Then he started turning into the person he warned me about. I watched her posture, the way she kept checking over her shoulder. She was not trying to charm me. She was trying to survive and also trying to unload guilt somewhere safe. Where is your water now? I asked. Low, she said. The trio took one of our containers yesterday when we were moving. Grant wanted to chase them. I said no. He said I was weak. I nodded once and reached into my pack, pulling out one bottle. This is not a friendship gesture, I said. This is logistics. Drink half, save half. She took it with both hands and did exactly that, measured and controlled. Then she wiped the bottle mouth with her sleeve and handed it back. What are you doing now? She asked. I am leaving this area, I said. My cliff trick is done. Once people know a place exists, they test it until it breaks. Sierra's eyes flicked toward the canyon. They will bring more, she said. Grant will bring more. He will use your cabin as a lure. Yes, I said. And gunshots will bring infected. That will ruin everyone's plan. She swallowed, looking at the ground. I do not want to go back to him, she said. That was a request without saying please. It was also a problem. Taking her with me meant another mouth, another set of needs, another person who could betray me later if fear got big enough. Leaving her meant she either got taken by the trio, killed by infected, or crawled back to Grant because he was the nearest structure. None of those outcomes sat well, but well was not the standard anymore. Viable was the standard. I tested the logic out loud, because saying it makes it real. If you come with me, you follow my rules, I said. No surprises, no wandering off, no taking my gear. If you do, I leave you, no debate. Sierra nodded quickly. Fine, she said. Tell me what to do. We moved within minutes. Constant movement was the only way to keep the cliff behind us before Grant realized I had escaped and started hunting. We stayed in the trees, parallel to the wash but not in it. We avoided open rock shelves that would silhouette us. When we heard distant yelling from the canyon, we froze and waited until it faded. Once we heard a small group of infected moving through brush, the sound of feet dragging and branches snapping. We backed away without running, taking a long detour around a thicket and stepping onto bare stone to keep our scent trail off the main path. By afternoon, we reached the side canyon seep I remembered. It was there, thin but real. Water darkened the rock and gathered in a shallow pocket. Sierra crouched and stared at it as if she did not trust it. We treat it, I said. I used the filter kit we traded for, pumped water into a bottle, then boiled a portion anyway because caution was cheaper than sickness. We drank in small amounts, refilled, and packed up. The seep would not last if the heat rose. We could not live on it long term. But it bought time, and time was the only currency that mattered. We traveled until the light shifted toward evening. We found a narrow overhang with a shallow recess that hid us from the wash. I used cord to rig a small tarp low, breaking wind. Sierra checked her crossbow string and bolts, moving with automatic care. I watched her hands. People reveal themselves in details. She was disciplined, not reckless. That lowered risk, not to zero, but enough that I could consider sleep. Before dark, I made one more decision, the last one tied to that cabin. I took the new rope segment and cut it into 2 shorter lengths. Sierra watched me with a question on her face. "Why?" she asked. "So nobody gets a perfect tool to climb back up," I said. "Not even us." She nodded slowly, understanding the cost. Cutting rope is not dramatic. It is practical sabotage. It is also admitting you are done with a place. Night settled. The canyon cooled. Far away, faint echoing shots cracked again, then stopped. After that, there was yelling, then silence, then something heavier, a dull roar that might have been a crowd of infected moving through brush, stirred up by noise. I lay on my side with my pack under my head and watched Sierra's outline in the dim light. She kept her boots on. She kept her crossbow close. I kept my pistol close. Nobody spoke for a long time. At some point, Sierra whispered, barely audible. "You were right," she said. "Inaccessibility is not safety. It is attention." I did not answer with comfort. Comfort is expensive when it makes you sloppy. "We keep moving tomorrow," I said. "We stay away from that cliff. If Grant survives, he will turn it into a trap. If he does not survive, the trap stays anyway." Morning came clear and cold. We packed fast and moved north, away from the main canyon lines, aiming for rough country where roads would not deliver crowds. We kept our pace steady, stopping only to drink and check behind us. Once we saw smoke again, closer now, and we detoured around it without trying to identify the source. Another time we found an abandoned day pack snagged in a bush, ripped open. No body nearby. We did not touch it. We left it where it was. By mid-afternoon, we reached a ridge where the cliff cabin would have been visible in the far distance if the light hit it right. I climbed a boulder and looked back anyway, using binoculars. I found the shelf. I found the cabin roof. I saw movement at the base, small figures, too far for detail. Then I saw a cluster of infected shapes near the wash, more than I had seen before, drifting in slow circles. The place was waking up in the worst way. People plus noise plus infected equals a spiral that feeds itself. I climbed down and handed the binoculars to Sierra. She looked, then lowered them, face tight. "Grant did this," she said. "He tried," I said. "The world did the rest." We walked until our legs started making mistakes. Then we stopped at a stand of pines tucked behind a rock outcrop. I set a simple perimeter with small stones that would crunch if stepped on. The best I could do without tools or time. Sierra did the same on her side. We ate without talking much, each of us chewing and thinking. I did not feel safe. I felt mobile. Mobility is a kind of safety if you can keep it. I never went back to the cliff cabin. Not once. The idea tempted me for a day, then faded as reality stacked up. A shelter you cannot defend is not a shelter. A fortress that depends on secrecy stops being a fortress the moment someone sees it. I learned that with my hands on rope and my back against a door while another climber tested my limits. Sierra stayed with me for weeks after that, long enough that we stopped flinching at each other's movements. We did not become friends in a storybook way. We became functional. We split tasks. We kept distance when we needed it. We kept rules clear enough that there was less room for panic decisions. Some days we walked. Some days we hid and listened. Some days we found water and treated it and moved on. The infected stayed mostly low in the washes, drawn by noise and scent and whatever instinct guided them. And we learned to read wind and terrain the way I used to read holds on a wall. The cliff taught me one final thing, and it was not about climbing. It was about what happens when you try to solve a social collapse with geometry. Elevation buys time, invisibility buys time, locks buy time. Time is useful, but time attracts people who want what you built. If you do not plan for that, your clever hideout becomes a story someone tells on the road. A story turns into a route. A route turns into a crowd. I do not know what happened to Grant. Sometimes I picture him up on that shelf, alone again, trying to hold a door against whoever came next. Sometimes I picture him walking away, adapting, surviving somewhere else, turning his next plan into another trap. I do not waste much energy on it anymore. My mind has enough work keeping my feet quiet and my water clean and my choices real. If you are hearing this because my voice ended up recorded somewhere, here is the clean lesson without drama. High places do not save you. Skills do not save you. They only change what kind of danger finds you first. If you build a life around being unreachable, the first person who reaches you decides what happens next. And there is always someone with the same hands, the same gear, and less patience.